this I have to disclaim because he's a friend and a client, but he makes a product called Longevinex, which is a resveratrol, vitamin D, quercetin, IP6 product that's been shown in lab testing that I've seen with my own eyes at the University of Wisconsin in Madison to reset your genetic clocks in your system 9 times more efficiently than even plain resveratrol. And what that means is when you were about 15, 16 years old, you know, you have certain switches in your genes that get turned on and off. And this resets them in a more youthful mode. That is, the ones that need to be on are on, the ones that need to be off are off. Because as you age, certain switches get turned on or get turned off, and that's what it's thought, at least, to lead to aging in humans, at least part of it. Yes?
I know there's a place for supplements in our diet, you know, if we're not feeling well or whatever, but I would personally be relying on fresh foods, whole meat breads, vegetables and fish and that. But today, you see, they're tampering with foods as well. And I suppose I'm coming on to the genetically modified foods. And I heard this third hand that tomatoes, there's one human gene in a tomato. Now, I don't know how true that is, but do we have a clue what we're eating, even these fresh foods?
No, you probably don't. Even when you think you're eating organic foods, a lot of those are fake. But so you try to buy locally. And know the farmers that you're buying from. And that's probably one of your safest bets. And that's actually one of the advantages of the lesser developed countries. They're buying their foods locally, and they can trust those people, so they're buying good food. Unfortunately, and I had this debate with the chairman, by the way, but first of all, I agree with you, and I think it's extremely important to have a good base. You have to eat fresh foods, excuse me, whole foods. The less refined, the better. The fresher, the better. The more organic, the less tampered with, the better. But it's increasingly hard to do that because the soils in all the countries have been getting depleted, because when there are British, American, and Canadian studies that show over the last 50 years the vitamin and mineral content of our soils has diminished by 50%. And so the quality of food that you and I are buying now, even from local farmers typically, unless it's organic, is less than those of our grandparents, that our grandparents were buying. And coincidentally, the tables that these morons are relying on at the Codex meetings are outdated tables showing the food content, the nutrient content of foods from 50 years ago a lot of times. That's not always true, but it's often true. And I had an argument with the committee chairman, Dr. Grossklaus, over this. He said, no, absolutely not. The quality of the vitamins, the fruits and vegetables being produced today is the same as it was 50 years ago. And he refused to believe that there was a difference, and yet you even just think about it logically, what are they putting back into the soil? It's all these artificial fertilizers. They aren't putting in most cases, certainly on the agribusiness level, the big, huge farms, they aren't putting back the natural items. They're putting back just, they probably have nitrogen. I'm sorry, I'm blocking on the two other main ingredients.
Phosphate and potassium.
Thank you. Nitrogen, potassium, and
phosphate.
And phosphate. Thank you very much. Those three items, which of course are polluting rivers and streams as well, but they aren't getting back into the soil the mineral and nutrient content that you need, such as selenium. That's why for those in the British Isles who are eating bread and thinking they're getting enough selenium from that, if they even think that far, they are not. They're getting a very selenium deficient diet, hence the increase in cancer rates and other things. So, also, I'm sorry, one last point on what you said, because there's another thing. Also, our grandparents didn't face the toxic load that we face today. They weren't faced with PCBs, herbicides, pesticides, air pollution levels that we're faced with today. 50 years ago, there was some of that, of course, and depending where you live, maybe even a lot of that, but mostly not. Nowadays, you have much more of a biochemical onslaught So how do you deal with that? Just by eating a balanced diet? It's no longer balanced. You have to do something actively to confront that, because otherwise you won't. And also, I'll still remind you again, that we are not producing adequate levels of vitamin C. In a typical standard American diet, standard Irish diet, standard British diet, you're not getting enough vitamin C. You can eat oranges till your face is orange, and you aren't getting enough vitamin C.
It's just one more here, Scott.
Okay.
I just want to find out your views on German new medicine.
On what medicine?
German new medicine.
German new medicine?
Yeah,
German new medicine. I don't know.
I don't know.
No, tell me, please, 'cause I can be educated.
I have to go into too much detail, but there's a website up.
Okay. Are you referring to medicine that is outside the mainstream?
Yeah. It's
Like the
German. It's
heilpraktikers?
natural practices.
Well, you know, the Germans have been very good about that. You know, the heilpraktikers are ubiquitous throughout Germany, and we have a number of them that are members of our organization. So I am familiar with those. I just wasn't familiar with the term.
Yeah, just German new medicine.
Okay.
It's worth for you to have a look
Okay.
as well.
Thank you for mentioning that. Now I know a new term.
Oh, but
It's okay unless people want to go, oh,
maybe one more. Just on the issue that I brought up before, but if you're growing your own veg and
if
pesticide
you were growing your own what?
vegetables,
Or vegetables, sorry. Okay.
would the pesticides that you're using, would that be regulated by Codex, or if you were, would they enforce you using pesticides?
Well, it's a long way downstream before codexes would reach that far, but indirectly it probably would, because the Ireland would go by the EC directives on that, and the EC directives would be hand in glove with the Codex guidelines at some point. They aren't right now, but they will be at some point. So yes, it would be. Now, you're talking about going in your own backyard and doing it.
Yeah.
Well, it's like growing marijuana. I mean, you know, if you get caught, then they'll do something about it. If you don't, you could go for decades. So,
Maybe I'll start growing some weed.
yeah, grow some weed. No, I can't say that on this. Do not grow weed. I think, well, you haven't talked as much, so go ahead, Laura.
Does your organization deal at all with the issue of seeds and companies like Monsanto and
The Terminator seeds, yeah. Laura's question was, does our organization deal with the seed issue like Monsanto Terminator seeds? And the question is, or the answer is yes, we do. And we've been opposing that for quite some time. In fact, actually, our organization is so unpopular for its opposition. Of course, this predates Monsanto Terminator seeds, but we had the American Medical Association spying on our conventions. And we had a researcher, we never knew this, although we suspected it, but we had a researcher from some Midwestern university contact us with an email about 3 or 4 years ago. He said, did you know you were being spied on? I've been going through the files, the records of the AMA here at their headquarters, and I see they used to send spies every year to your conventions to see what you're up to. And I took that as the supreme compliment. You know, I thought, God, these people fear us. So. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, just talking about GM, farmers here, I've heard a few times, seem to be quite keen for the EU to authorise the use of GM soya in animal feed.
That surprises me, yeah. That she was saying that local farmers, or I'm sorry, Irish farmers, or a large number of them are in favor of using GM soy seeds, right?
And that they're trying to put pressure on the EU to authorise that. They're complaining that the EU is hanging back on that issue. Also
Well,
because,
yeah.
the French, I think, are very strong against GM products.
They are. So your question was?
Does your organisation have a view on, you know, having GM food infected animals and then getting into the food chain?
Yeah, we're absolutely opposed to it, and that's part of the reason we're probably the most vocal opponents to it. At the Codex Committee on Food Labeling meetings, in fact, at the last meeting in Calgary, I spoke out 9 times on the subject of GM food labeling. That was almost more than any other delegation in the country delegations. But you have to give credit where credit is due. The EC representative at those meetings, a Frenchman based in Brussels, I forget his name, kind of embarrassed, but because